Hi, folks. I'm Ken Ween. With me today, Monica Brinkman, and our special guest, Judy Stanigar. And this is Let's Talk It Over. And Judy, you recently came out with a book, which, as with all the books we have on the show, I've read and enjoyed. If I don't enjoy them, folks, I don't talk about them.
No, he doesn't.
Sorry, I'm picky. Now, let me tell you a little about Judy Stanigar and her novel, which is called Marika's, is it pronounced Marika or Marika?
Marika.
Marika's Best Laid Plan, which is published by All Things That Matter Press, our good friends at All Things That Matter Press. Judy Stanigar is a psychotherapist. She was born in Israel, and when she was a teen, she moved with her family here to the US, where she ended up at Columbia University's Graduate School of Social Work, which is one of the best social work schools in the world. And she's worked as a psychotherapist, and she's worked, among other things, in a methadone program. Was that in New York City?
That was it. Well, two of them, one in Connecticut and one in New York City. Yeah.
And of course, that, I have to tell you, folks, is the background of this novel. Marika is a social worker, and she is working in a methadone clinic. And this is a novel about love and what love means. But the thing about both Judy and Marika is that they have both been personally affected by the Holocaust, the Shoah. In Marika's case, it is perhaps a little bit clearer, but in Judy's personal life, and I hope she's going to write another, even more autobiographical novel in which she explores more about her father, because this novel is, I think, more centered on Marika's mother's effect on.
About what year is it that, Ken? Is it right after the Holocaust or Judy?
Well, no, it can't be, because she's a social worker, so it's got to be like at least into the, 60s?
No, the novel takes place in the mid-1980s in New York City. So Marika is 30 or thereabouts, yeah. Right. About to turn 30.
Right. And she is working in this methadone. So it's a cultural, the next thing is it's an intercultural novel, because a lot of the people there are Black, American Blacks. And of course, Judy's character, Marika, is from this Holocaust-driven Jewish background. And then there is also a hot Jamaican doctor. And Judy, is that also autobiographical?
Yes, somewhat, yeah. Yes. I mean, there is a hot Jamaican in my life. He's not a doctor.
He's not a doctor, but he's
not a doctor, but he's a hot Jamaican.
And you married a Jamaican. And
yes. We met at NYU, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So tell me, how do you think the Holocaust affected parenting?
You know, can I just read a brief line from a book I'm just reading called Emotional Inheritance by a psychologist who's writing about this second intergenerational trauma.
Okay, just make sure you name the psychologist, because we don't want to be accused of.
Sure, her name is Galit. Her last name is Galit, Galit Atlas, Atlas.
Okay.
So this is just a brief line, a quote from Jeremiah. It says, "The parents have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge."
Absolutely.
So, you know, and I understand you're also a psychologist, Ken, so you would get that. Yeah, you cannot live in an environment with, no matter who your parents are, and not be influenced by them one way or the other. So in Marika's case, and in mine too, growing up in a home where someone has gone through a traumatic event, it just seeps into the air. It's with the mother's milk, you know. And actually, so that's basically how parents influence children, you know, in every which way.
Well, do you think in Marika's case, now Marika has a sister. Do you have a sibling?
Yes, I do. I also have an older sister. Yeah.
Okay, Marika has an older sister, and both of them have issues about what they want in a relationship. Marika is almost cunning. She is so deliberate. She wants security. And her sister wants true love. And it struck me that kind of not understanding of what the wholeness of love, the wholeness of relationship struck me, because the people I have known who did grow up with parents who had gone through the Holocaust and had been in the camps, many of them have issues around what is love, what is emotional commitment, how much emotion can I show? And it seemed to me that the parents either overvalued or distanced. It was like either I can't let you go because I'm so terrified you'll be taken, or I have to push you away because I'm terrified you'll be taken from me. But either way, it's always underlying it. I mean, having gone through those camps, it must have been so difficult for any parent to then be able to juggle that attachment and release issue.
Exactly. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. It's two sides to the same coin, you know, the opposite side, but it's a reaction to the same thing. How do you learn to love again when you've gone through such horrors? In my mom's case, you know, her siblings, her parents, they all were killed. And in my case, also growing up in Israel, you mentioned my next book. So I'm writing a memoir of my childhood in Israel, because growing up in a place where you're surrounded by everybody who was kind of Holocaust, a very large percentage of the people at the time. This is shortly after the war, the late 1950s. So everyone has gone through that experience, and everybody's traumatized and a little cuckoo.
Oh, but they're not.
Of course they would be.
And
so yeah, and it's very difficult because my mom's way, and many of them are either overly clinging, they cannot let you go, and then there's insecure attachment forms, or else they're detached, and again you have the insecure attachment forming.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, then adults struggle, and that's the intergenerational trauma too, and that produces a lot of anxiety. Actually, there were studies that show that there's a lower level of cortisol for children of Holocaust survivors. So that means they are not as able to deal with traumatic events. They're higher level of anxiety in these kids.
Yeah, they have learned how to handle anxiety because their parents have such
the anxiety. Yeah.
Which brings up a fascinating thing, folks, in case you haven't thought about it. We think of organisms as independent. You know, like I'm sitting here and you're seeing something you call Ken Ween, but I'm made up of organisms. Not just cells, but literally there are organisms in me, bacteria and things in me that are part of who I am, that influence who I am. And if I am in the room with somebody, the pheromones, these very delicate molecules that are given off affect me, and they affect you folks too. Now I'm in a room by myself. If the three of us were in the same room having this conversation, it probably would feel different because we would be influencing each other in ways, and that goes on right from birth, particularly right from birth. I remember years ago, Nat Ackerman, who was the father of family therapy, whom I studied with for a while, was saying to us that the mothers of colicky children give sour milk. Now, he didn't mean it literally, but what he was saying is that it's not the baby's got colic, it's that the mother and baby have colic.
Interesting.
Yeah. So now you said you're going to write another book, but you already have 2 books out, right? I want just to get you to mention, we've been talking about this particular book, Marika's Best Laid Plan, but you have another book, and I want to give you a chance to mention it and tell us about it. I haven't read this one, folks.
Sure. My first book, it was called A Quartet in Love, and it's more autobiographical in some ways than this one. It's about a young woman going to college, her first year college, where there is a little bit of a culture clash because she's kind of a new to this country. But anyway, it's about love and how it takes place between the 18-year-old and at the same time the struggle with that some of the other, there are four characters there, each in a different stage in life, and each of them how they relate to love and what they want out of love and what love looks like at various stages in life. So it's called A Quartet in Love.
So folks, when you go to the bottom of the show, you know, where Monica puts up the description, there's going to be a link to Marika's Best Laid Plan. That'll take you into Amazon so you can buy a copy, which you really should. You can buy it in print or in ebook, and it's a really good read. But you can also click on Judy's name, and it'll take you to her author page where you can also find out about her other book. And then there'll be a new book. Yeah, are you going to publish that through All Things That Matter Press, or are you?
Well, I don't know because I haven't finished it. So my first concern is to finish the book, and it's a memoir. So we'll see what happens.
Do you have a title for it, Judy? The new book?
You know, it's a working title, and the title is After the Holocaust.
Okay.
Oh, that'd be really interesting.
Judy, your own parents, your mother was in the camps, and your father met her in the camps, but he was not in the camps. He was actually, I don't know, fortunate or unfortunate enough he lived in Poland. For those of you who don't remember your history of the beginning of the Second World War, Russia and Germany were allies. Mm-hmm. And they had agreed to divide up Poland, and the Russians came in on one side and the Germans came in the other side. The Russians were also attacking Finland, which is a whole other story, and I hope sometime we're going to be able to get somebody on the show to tell us about, especially now with the Ukrainian situation, how the Finns stood up to the Russians. It's really a wonderful story of bravery and courage among the Finns, but the Poles too. Many of the Poles, especially the Jewish Poles, in that part, in what was the Eastern Poland, they didn't, you know, they wanted to get away. They knew the Germans were coming, and they went into the Russian community, hoping that the Russians would understand that they were not enemies. But the Russians under Stalin didn't understand anybody wasn't an enemy.
No.
And so those people, including Judy's dad, sent off to the Gulag. So what happens then? How does he get out of the Gulag, Judy?
Well, he was in it's hard labor. He was there with his cousin who died rather quickly, but and then in, I forget which year it was, the Russians wanted to, by then Russia and Germany were at war, and Russia needed more to beef up its military, and offered political prisoners the opportunity, if they joined the military, they would commute their sentence. And since my dad had a very long sentence, he quickly volunteered to join the military. And so he was with the Russian army. It was a Russian-Polish unit in the army, and they liberated the town and the camps that my mom was in. And so he happened to meet, actually he met my mom's sister, and then he met my mom.
And he
was her liberator.
I'm sorry?
He was her liberator.
Yeah. But now he met her in the camp, and she must have been just in horrible shape. I mean, he couldn't have been in great shape, but she must have been in just horrible shape. I mean, have they ever shared with you and your sister any of the story of what attracted them to one another and what allowed the liberator and the victim to combine?
Well, it's interesting. People, at least my parents, and often I've worked with a lot of children of Holocaust survivors, they did not like to talk too much about their whole experience. But I think that my dad fell madly in love with my mom, who was apparently beautiful, even when she was so thin, and she quickly gained weight because she ate like a pig, she said, right after the Holocaust.
I'm sure many did.
Yeah. So, but he fell madly in love with her. Just, whatever causes the X element that causes someone to fall in love at first sight, we don't know what that is, but it happened. I think in her case, she was the youngest in her family, and her two older sisters were already married. And she had no parents, she had no profession because she was 16 when the war started. Ooh. And I think she would have married, I hate to say it, married anybody who was going to take care of her. But
she needed security.
She learned to love him, and he fell in love with her.
And the aunt, you said he first met your aunt. Did one or more of your aunts make it through and go to Israel?
My parents were the first ones, and then she had three other sisters who survived.
Oh, wow.
And so they all followed her to Israel, and then one went to the US and then brought the other one to the US, and then the third, and then we were the third ones. And one aunt stayed in Israel. Yeah. Initially, my mom, yeah. Go ahead.
Did your sister come with you? I mean, because I don't know how old you were when you came. Did she come to the?
Yeah, I was 13 and my sister was 17. Yeah.
So you are.
What I like, Judy, is we don't often get to hear about the relationship between the Holocaust survivors who became parents. We always hear about what went on in their lives, but not really the relationship they had with their children. I was wondering, after all they've been through, was there like a deeper sadness within them that they carried?
That is such a profound question, because you hit it right on the nail. It's not that there wasn't laughter in the house, but there was this permeating sadness that just kind of seeped in to the air, this happiness. For example, holidays coming up, Passover. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember a Passover as a child where my mom or with my aunt they wouldn't be sitting there, and all of a sudden this sadness overwhelmed them because they remembered
The memories.
yes, all the children memories of what, of their parents because they all perished. I mean, I didn't have grandparents because on both sides they all perished and so on. So yeah, absolutely, you hit it. It's that this kind of heaviness, a sadness. There's something about not ever seeing your parent be truly like happy, like just have a joie de vivre.
Be joyful. Yeah. Yeah, I understand completely.
I don't know that there are many Jewish poems in which joie de vivre exists, even those that have been part of the Holocaust. It's not part of our culture.
Not in our gene, not in our genetic makeup.
But I do think one of the things that I'm glad you brought that up, Monica, because in Marika's Best Laid Plan, the mother's pervasive sadness, as Judy is talking about, comes through and has major impact on Judy, her sister, the plot of the book. And that's all I'm going to say, folks, because I want to tease you into reading it.
You don't want to give it away. No.
I don't want to give it away. But that sadness is really very beautifully captured. And so therefore, I want to say something. Let's talk about Marika's neighbor just a little bit, because you brought up something, and I think it is very wonderful what you brought up, which is the absence of grandparents. And especially, I think, I don't know about other cultures. I mean, I suppose grandparents are important to everybody, but having grown up in the Jewish American culture, I know grandparents are such a central theme and about life. And you grew up without grandparents, and so did Marika. But then there is a neighbor. We want to talk a little about her neighbor and what that person represented to you as the author.
Sure. So this neighbor came to me, this character, just presented himself. He was the easiest character for me to write because he came to me fully clothed and fully formed. And it was my fantasy of what a grandfather would be like. Because it's not just the absence of grandparents that I grew up with, and many kids in Israel did too, but there was so little talk about them because the parents were both kind of shut down. They didn't want to talk a lot, and you didn't want to invade their privacy or whatever to ask too much about it. So it was a blank slate. You really didn't know who were they? Who would they have been? So I had to create this character, and to me, he was just this someone who loved you unconditionally, Mr. Saperstein, Mr. S. He's just wise and loving and gentle, and that's who I thought a grandfather should be like.
And then you do something else with him, which I think is just fabulous because it really does capture one of the essential parts of grandparents. Because, you know, when you're a kid, your grandparents are pretty old already, and they're not too good at wrestling or, you know, of course, nowadays, older people are younger, so maybe they are. But you can't have pillow fights with grandpa or, you know, things like that. But food becomes such an essential part of the connection. And one of the things I love about this is Marika connects to this grandfather figure, this Mr. Saperstein, in a way where they're sharing food and creating that connection through food that you think of as part of the cultural transmission, which is Judaism. Jewish culture is very much about food. I guess all cultures to some degree, but you know, it just is part, you know, part of how you do it. And of course, Judaism is unique in that we even have some food-driven rituals, such as the Passover Seder, where there's a plate on which traditional things are, and as Judaism has evolved, though, the plates are even evolving. It's very interesting to me. And then we have the sukkah, where you're outside eating out and sharing certain things. So food and Purim, we make pastries in the shape of Haman's hat. You have all these wonderful things that grandparents share with their grandchildren. And so you have created this real grandfather. One of the things that I like about your book, and again, folks, the name of the book is Marika's Best Laid Plan, and it's written by our guest today, Judy Stanigar, and it is published by All Things That Matter Press. And one of the things that I really found fascinating is I saw your depth as a therapist, because what becomes very clear to me as I'm reading, but it's very subtle. It isn't like bang on your head. It's not preached at you. It's shown, not told you, is that without this loving grandparent figure, I do not think that Marika could have allowed herself to truly fall in love.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That was the I suppose the tool, if you will, but that's the way she learns that it's okay to love and accept love, and that enriches your life, because without it, life is really very painful. I mean, she's trying to escape pain by not being in love, but her life is full of pain because it's a lonely one. So by allowing this man in her life, by allowing him to love her and her to love him, she's unbeknownst to her, learning that it's okay to love, and she's learning that she's lovable too.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing the voice of the children of the Holocaust survivors out, because, like I said, it's something that I don't see that often. And you made a great story out of that. That's a hard thing to do, because a lot of people, it's without being, so factual and reading like a textbook, to make it into a story is not that easy.
Now, Judy, could I ask you to hold the cover up just so people can see it? Because
yes.
I read it on my Kindle, so I don't have, there's the cover. And
Nice.
folks, you can see it's Marika's Best Laid Plan, and it's a good read.
Yeah.
Does the feather have significance?
Yes, because inside, what do you call the page that's before the text begins? I have a quote from Emily Dickinson's "Hope is the thing with feathers."
Right. Mm-hmm.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
So it's not a dark; it's a hopeful book. So
yes.
Oh, very much so. Oh,
that's something we should stress, right? Because a lot of them are so tear-jerking. And
no, this is a book that has sadness in it. We haven't talked about, for example, the methadone clinic clients and some of their sadness. This is a book about the transcendence of love and the possibility of hope and joy in the face of enormous sadness and pain.
yes.
right.
And by the way, I love the irony of the title. Because let me just tell you, folks, we haven't talked about Marika's plan. And again, I deliberately, because the plan is itself fascinating and a wonderful expression of her pathology and how it goes astray and how it is really cool. But the irony is, in the title, is that, of course, the more we try and control life, the more we try and plan, the more we try and determine what's going to happen to us, the more likely we are to screw it up.
I know, isn't that the truth?
Exactly. And I have to give due to Debbie Harris at All Things That Matter, because we've been going back and forth with titles, and finally something hit with her and she came up with the title, because I was going crazy with different titles. But yes, you're absolutely right. That's the irony of this book with this there's a saying, man plans and God laughs.
Right.
So true.
She hatches this plan of how she's going to find a man to rescue her from her misery, and it just doesn't go according to her plans. It backfires.
But God is kind to her, and she is found by a man who is going to not rescue her, because you don't get rescued from misery. You have to rise above it, and I think that's again part of the whole message of the Holocaust, if you will, is that those who survived, maybe not in their lives, maybe not even in their children's lives, but ultimately they are triumphant, because it may be their grandchildren or even their great-grand, but because they survive and make difference and re-enter the world of human relationship and love, and are able to love, and that ability to find connection to one another, which is ultimately, in my opinion, being very much a humanist, as well as being from a Jewish tradition, to me, that ability to find one another and connect and bring the joy of life alive, that is finding God.
Right. And that you said that word connection, that is to me the essence of this book too. That without connections, it doesn't have to be romantic love, but without that connection to other humans, life is just not what it's not worth it. It's like,
right.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I need to buy this book now after talking with you. It just sounds fascinating and an interesting story. And an angle that many don't ever address. So
it's a good book.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
And folks, as always, we're going to have a little something for you next. Judy, thank you so much. And here you go. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
The word Holocaust comes from the Greek words holos and kostos, which mean whole and burn. The term used to refer to a Jewish sacrificial offering to God that was laid on an altar and burned. Since the 20th century, though, the word has taken on a new and horrible meaning. Now it refers to the systematic murder of 6 million European Jews by the Nazi Party. Although it is hard to talk about the Holocaust without referring to World War II, they are not the same thing. The Holocaust was one of the worst genocides the world has ever seen. Fully 2/3 of all the Jews in the world were murdered, not as part of the war effort, but simply because of hate. After World War I, and as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was in a state of desolation and economic depression with little hope of recovery. Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power, and it was partly because they found someone to blame for the country's difficulties: the Jews. Anti-Semitism, or hatred of Jewish people, had been a rampant evil in Europe for hundreds of years, and for Hitler, the Jews became a convenient target to direct all the anger and frustration brewing inside Germany. Of course, Hitler wasn't just hunting for a scapegoat. He himself was deeply anti-Semitic and believed Jews were an inferior race that would pollute German purity. His persecution began with discrimination, limiting the Jews' freedoms and rights, on to outright removal and persecution, until it culminated in mass murder. Meanwhile, World War II raged around the globe, disguising the extent of the Holocaust's atrocities. Jews were the main target of Hitler's extermination, but not the only one. Another 5 million people deemed inferior were murdered, such as gypsies, gay people, and handicapped people. Taken together, the Holocaust claimed 11 million lives between 1941 and 1945. Such horror can never be forgotten.
The Beauty of Spring by Kenneth Wing. The Palo Verde have declared spring with yellow flowers and glowing green bark. The pollen lies deep on the sidewalk, not rose petals, but Sabrina is content. She looks down, her sandaled feet have taken a saffron hue. Felix will love them, she smiles at the thought. They have been together for 3 months. It is little things like pollen-colored feet that bond them. She imagines his hands washing her toes and tickling her soles with the raspiness of his hard carpenter's hands. He'll dry them with one of those thick Egyptian cotton towels, bought as seconds, the bright yellow towels seem, at the moment, important. She loves the way he cares for her body, the way he scrubs her back in the shower and applies the almond-scented moisturizer afterwards. She loves it when he takes the comb and brush and tries to do her hair. He cares for her in ways that surprise and delight. The sex ain't bad either. They had made love 3 times the night before, her legs clasped around his thin hips, her back arching and settling in rhythmic ecstasy, each time climaxing in unison. Sabrina thinks about his kisses, the gentle, slightly nipping kisses on her breast, working his way from her cleavage to the areola, one breast and then the other. She wonders at his lover's tongue, so soft, so full of caresses. Such thoughts excite her. Sabrina can feel the moistness of arousal. Her gait changes, faster, more of a skip than a stride. She tosses her head. The light brown of her hair almost dances with the movement. Her eyes seem to change color. Blue deepens into lavender. Reaching deep into the left pocket of her jeans, she fishes for the door key. "Felix," she calls from the bottom of the stairs. There's silence. "I'm home," she sings as she climbs towards the 3rd-floor apartment. It had been hers, but now it is theirs. Sabrina imagines there are 2 rooms. The living area with its second-hand couch, small table, 3 chairs, not matching, but the right height television, and the tiny desk that holds her computer. The bedroom. When had they put up that print, 2 bodies entwined? It had replaced the crucifix her parents gave her when she had graduated from St. Mary's. "Hello," she sings out again as she uses the same key to open the apartment door. Still quiet. He's not here. There is a moment of panic, a moment she remembers, sitting on the orange couch. Sabrina pulls her knees to her chest. "I'm out of here," he had said. "Why? What did I?" He laughed kindly without sarcasm. "I'm falling in love with you." "So why are you leaving?" "Because happiness is fleeting, like the beauty of spring."